When you hear the name Tolstoy, what comes to mind? Probably War and Peace, right? The literary genius, the giant of Russian literature. But that's not the Tolstoy we're talking about today. Nope. We're going way deeper. We're looking at his soul. We're diving into the secret diaries of a man who, at the absolute peak of his fame, felt a soul-crushing emptiness.
See, there were two Tolstoys. On one side, you've got the writer the whole world knew and celebrated. But on the other, there was the private man, a seeker, totally tormented, who was convinced his entire life was a massive lie. And this huge gap between the public hero and the private fraud, well, that's the real story.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How could the guy who had it all, we're talking fame, money, a family, you name it, feel like a complete and utter hypocrite? What in the world was eating away at him? Well, the answer, the key to this whole mystery, is hidden away in a place he never ever wanted us to see, his secret diary. And this wasn't just some daily log of what he had for lunch. Oh no, this was a battlefield. This was where he went to war with himself.
This diary was raw. It was totally unfiltered. It's where he put himself on trial every single day, asking the most brutal questions about his own hypocrisy and this desperate search for what it all means. It was his mirror, and he forced himself to look into it.
So let's picture the scene. Tolstoy is on top of the world. He's at the absolute height of his career. But while everyone else is throwing parades for him, he's privately just falling apart. I mean, think about it. The man was a global celebrity. He'd achieved everything an artist could possibly dream of. But on the inside, all that success brought him zero peace. In fact, it did the exact opposite. He was just drowning in guilt, living this life of luxury while writing about the struggles of poor peasants. The hypocrisy was literally eating him alive. And that guilt led to this absolutely shocking confession from his diary. I often wanted to suffer. He was so tormented by his own easy life that he actually craved pain. It's like he thought suffering was the only way he could possibly make up for the sin of being so comfortable. This is way beyond just feeling a little down. This is a deep spiritual self-hatred. In his search for truth, Tolstoy realized he first had to destroy all the lies, and he came to believe that pretty much all of society was built on a foundation of lies. So he decided to take a sledgehammer to its main pillars: art, government, and even intellect itself. First up, art. He looked at the whole art world, even the absolute masters like Shakespeare and Beethoven, and basically called most of it utter nonsense. He saw it as just self-indulgent entertainment for the rich. For Tolstoy, it was simple. If a simple farmer couldn't understand and be moved by a piece of art, then it had failed. It just wasn't real art.
And if you thought his take on art was wild, his view on government was even more radical. He argued that the state, at its core, is just an institution based on violence, and that when you pay your taxes or serve in the army, you're becoming a part of that violence. This was a totally anarchist view, which was pretty shocking coming from a Russian aristocrat.
And finally, he went after the brainiacs, the intellectuals and scientists. He believed that truth is actually simple, but that academics use fancy, complicated language on purpose to keep their power and basically to confuse everybody else. The kind of truth he was after couldn't be found in some library or a lab. It had to be felt right here, in the heart.
Okay, so he's just demolished art, government, and the entire intellectual world. What's left? He had to turn inward. He had to build a whole new spiritual foundation, from scratch, one that made sense to him. And here's where he has this huge breakthrough. He completely redefines God. For Tolstoy, God isn't some being up in the sky. God is love. It's the universal principle that connects all of us. So if you want to live a spiritual life, you just have to align what you want with what all of humanity wants, which is, at its core, love. It's a game-changing way of looking at it.
He actually laid this out in 4 pretty clear stages. Think of it like ripples in a pond. It all starts with love for yourself. Then, that love expands outward, first to the people around you, then to all living things. And in that final stage, when your love is big enough to include everything, you become one with all of existence. And that, for Tolstoy, is what it feels like to experience God.
Now, this wasn't just some nice idea for him to think about. Tolstoy was obsessed, I mean absolutely obsessed, with putting this philosophy into practice. He needed clear, practical rules for how to actually live a meaningful life based on these ideas. This leads us to his most famous and maybe most misunderstood idea: non-resistance to evil.
Now, this doesn't mean being a doormat. It's an active strategy. See, fighting violence with more violence just keeps the horrible cycle going. Tolstoy argued that if you absorb the violence without fighting back, you break the cycle. The evil has nowhere else to go. It just fizzles out.
And what's so fascinating is that his ethics were based on pure logic, not emotion. Here's how he figured it. Our desires for ourselves, more money, more fame, they're endless. You can never truly be satisfied. But the desire to help other people, that has a clear finish line. Building a house for someone has an end. Giving someone a meal has an end. So for Tolstoy, helping others was the only rational way to live a meaningful life.
And so, after decades of agony and searching, his entire philosophy, all that struggle, it all boiled down to this one simple, powerful idea. The only reason we're here, the sole purpose of our lives, is to grow the love that's inside of us. That was it. That was the answer he'd been looking for his entire life.
But here's the kicker. Did Tolstoy think he'd finally cracked the code, that he was enlightened? Not even close. He realized that the search is the point, and his final insight into what it means to be human is maybe his most profound of all.
He came to believe that a person isn't a fixed thing. You're not good or bad, you're a process. He said a human being is like a river, always flowing between different states. One moment you're kind, the next you're cruel. One moment you're wise, the next you're a fool. There's no final destination. There's only the flow.
And that brings Tolstoy's century-old question right to our doorstep. In this age of perfectly curated online profiles, we all feel that pressure to show off our best self, right? The angel. But Tolstoy's big idea suggests the real work isn't about perfecting that angel. It's about understanding the messy, contradictory villain we try to keep hidden. So is the goal to erase our flaws for the world to see? Or is it to learn to love the whole complicated person we actually are?